I answered my front door on a Tuesday morning, and there stood Linda, my daughter who vanished 10 years ago, now impeccably dressed in a business suit. Beside her stood a sharp-eyed lawyer holding a briefcase. Linda smiled coldly and said she was here for Ethan and his money. My hands started trembling. Inside, 18-year-old Ethan sat at his computer, oblivious that the mother who abandoned him when he was 8 had returned to destroy everything we had built together. My breath caught in my throat as Linda gestured toward the man beside her. He was tall, mid-40s, with silver-streaked hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Mother, this is Gerald Thompson, my attorney," Linda said. Her voice saccharine sweet, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "We need to come inside and discuss Ethan's situation." I gripped the doorframe, blocking their entry. "Ethan's situation? You mean the grandson you abandoned a decade ago?" Gerald stepped forward, pulling a manila envelope from his briefcase. "Mrs. Crawford, we're here on a legal matter. These are papers notifying you that Mrs. Crawford, Crawford is filing for guardianship and financial control of her son, Ethan Michael Crawford." The world tilted beneath my feet. I took the papers with shaking hands, barely processing the legal jargon swimming before my eyes. Linda's expression remained cold, almost triumphant. "He's my son, Mother. You've had him long enough. It's time he came home where he belongs." "Home?" I choked on the word. "You left him on my doorstep with a suitcase and disappeared. You don't get to call yourself his home." "We'll see what the court says," Gerald interjected smoothly. "You have 2 weeks to respond. We'll be in touch." He handed me his card, and they turned to leave. Linda paused at the bottom of the porch steps, looking back with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Tell Ethan his mother is back. I'm sure he'll be thrilled." I stood there long after their car disappeared down the street, the papers clutched in my hand, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The memories came flooding back as I closed the door and leaned against it. 10 years ago, Linda had been a different person. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see who she really was. When Ethan was diagnosed with autism at age 5, everything changed. Her husband, Marcus, couldn't handle it. He was one of those men who needed everything to be perfect, and a son who didn't make eye contact and had meltdowns in public didn't fit his image. Marcus left when Ethan turned 6. Linda tried for 2 more years. I'll give her that. But I watched my daughter spiral. Watched her grow resentful of her own child. She'd look at him sometimes with such emptiness, as if she couldn't understand how he'd come from her. The day she left is burned into my memory. Ethan was 8 years old. She showed up at my door late one evening with Ethan and a single battered suitcase containing his clothes, a few toys, and his favorite coding book. Even at 8, he was obsessed with computers. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," Linda had said, her eyes hollow. "He'll never be normal. He doesn't even act like he loves me. I need a real life, not this constant struggle." "He does love you, Linda. He just shows it differently," I'd pleaded. "I don't care," she'd said flatly. "I'm done. I'm signing temporary custody papers tomorrow. Take him. You're better at this than I ever was." And then she was gone. No phone calls on his birthday. No cards at Christmas. No child support checks. Nothing. For 10 years, I raised Ethan on my widow's pension, on Social Security benefits, on every penny I could scrape together. But Ethan, my beautiful, brilliant grandson, he thrived in ways Linda never gave him the chance to. His autism meant he saw patterns others missed, could focus with an intensity that was almost superhuman. By age 10, he was teaching himself advanced coding. We'd spend hours at the public library because I couldn't afford a good computer at home. The librarians grew to love him, setting aside time for him on their computers. His social skills were challenging. Other kids didn't understand him, and he didn't understand them. But online, in coding forums and programming communities, he found his people. People who valued what his mind could do, not how he struggled to maintain small talk. At 16, Ethan started developing an app. It was designed for people with autism, a productivity tool that understood how their minds worked. He coded it in our tiny living room, hunched over a second-hand laptop I'd bought him for his 15th birthday. I'd watch him work for hours, his fingers flying across the keyboard, completely absorbed. By 17, his app had gained traction. Parents of autistic children discovered it. Then occupational therapists. Then schools. The user base grew from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands. 6 months ago, just after Ethan turned 18, a tech company out of California offered him $4,600,000 for his app. I remember the day the offer came through. Ethan showed me the email, his face expressionless as always, but I could see the slight tremor in his hands. "Is this real, Grandma?" he'd asked. I'd cried. I'd actually broken down sobbing because this boy, this incredible human being who'd been told he'd never amount to anything by his own mother, had built something that changed lives. We set up a trust with me as trustee until he turned 21. The money would pay for college, for his future, for everything he deserved. We celebrated quietly, the way Ethan preferred, with his favorite meal and a new mechanical keyboard for his computer. Now, I sat at my kitchen table, reading through the legal papers with growing horror. Linda was claiming she'd never legally relinquished custody. The temporary guardianship papers we'd signed 10 years ago were exactly that, temporary. She was demanding immediate guardianship and control of all of Ethan's assets. The papers alleged that I had manipulated and exploited a vulnerable minor, that I had alienated Linda from her son, and that I was improperly managing significant financial assets belonging to a disabled individual. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Grandma?" I looked up to find Ethan standing in the kitchen doorway. He'd heard everything. His face showed little emotion, but I'd learned to read the subtle signs. The way his fingers tapped against his leg, the slight tension around his eyes. "I remember when she left," he said quietly, moving to sit across from me. "I remember exactly what she said. Every word. Ethan, sweetie, I'm so sorry. I'll fight this. I promise you. I won't let her take anything from you." He was silent for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Last year, I found some documents in your filing cabinet when you asked me to look for your insurance papers. I saw the temporary custody forms. I researched family law. Grandma, she might still be my legal guardian. She never finished the permanent custody transfer." The room spun. I'd assumed, all these years, that the paperwork was complete. Linda had promised to finalize everything, but she'd disappeared before following through. "That means legally," Ethan continued in his matter-of-fact way, "she might have a legitimate claim to guardianship. And if she has guardianship, she controls the trust." I stared at my grandson, this brilliant boy who understood so much, and felt my world crumbling around us. Morning came too soon. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios all night. By 8 o'clock, Ethan and I were sitting in Douglas Harper's modest office downtown. Douglas had handled my late husband's estate 15 years ago, and he was the only lawyer I could afford on short notice. Douglas was in his late 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He read through Linda's petition carefully, his expression growing graver with each page. "Elisa," he finally said, setting the papers down, "I need to be honest with you. This is outside my usual scope. I handle estates, wills, simple contract disputes. This is a complex custody and financial guardianship case." "But what does it mean?" I asked, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "Can she really do this?" Douglas sighed heavily. "The problem is the temporary custody arrangement. It appears Linda technically remained Ethan's legal guardian. Without a formal adoption or permanent custody transfer, she retained parental rights. The fact that she had no contact doesn't automatically terminate those rights." My heart sank. "So she can just waltz back in after 10 years and take him?" "It's not that simple, but it's not impossible for her either. You'd need to prove abandonment, demonstrate that you're the de facto guardian, and show that returning custody to her would harm Ethan." He paused, then added gently, "You need a specialist in family law, someone who handles these cases regularly." "How much would that cost? For a case this complex, with significant assets involved?" You're looking at a minimum retainer of $30,000, possibly much more if it goes to trial. The number hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't access Ethan's trust fund for legal fees that would look like exactly what Linda was accusing me of. My pension was barely enough to cover our basic expenses. The house was paid off, but that was all I had. Douglas recommended a lawyer named Catherine Rodriguez, one of the best family law attorneys in the state. I thanked him, took the referral, and left his office feeling like I was drowning. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into gathering evidence. I collected everything I could find. School records, showing me listed as emergency contact and guardian. Medical records with my signature authorizing treatments. Receipts for clothes, food, school supplies, everything I'd provided for Ethan over 10 years. Bank statements showing 0 child support payments from Linda. I contacted neighbors who remembered when Linda left. Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down remembered it clearly. Mr. and Mrs. Chen across the street, who'd watched Ethan grow up, offered to testify. Ethan's therapist, Dr. Sarah Bennett, who'd been working with him since he was 9, documented the abandonment trauma in her records. I felt a surge of hope as I compiled everything. This evidence was damning. No judge could look at this and give custody to a woman who'd disappeared for a decade. With the help of a small loan against my house, I scraped together enough for Catherine Rodriguez's retainer. Her office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel. Catherine herself was in her early 40s, sharply dressed, with intelligent dark eyes that assessed everything. She reviewed my evidence carefully, asking pointed questions, taking notes. "This is strong," she finally said. "Very strong. The pattern of abandonment is clear. The documentation is thorough. Ethan is 18 now, which works in our favor. His preferences will carry significant weight." Relief flooded through me. "So, we can fight this?" "Absolutely. We'll file a response arguing that you are the de facto guardian, that Linda abandoned her parental responsibilities, and that Ethan should have autonomy over his own finances. At 18, he's legally an adult anyway, though the guardianship question complicates things." As Catherine was outlining our strategy, her assistant knocked and entered, holding an envelope. "This just arrived by courier. It's from Gerald Thompson's office." Catherine's expression shifted as she read the contents. The color drained slightly from her face. "What is it?" I asked, my brief hope already evaporating. Catherine looked up at me, then at Ethan, then back at the papers. "Linda has submitted her evidence. This is more sophisticated than I expected." She spread the documents across her desk. There were dozens of birthday cards, each in envelopes with postmarks spanning all 10 years. Cards addressed to Ethan, signed Love, Mom, with personal messages about missing him and hoping to see him soon. Bank statements showing monthly deposits of $200 into an account for Ethan's benefit. The deposits went back 7 years. Printed emails, allegedly sent from Linda to my email address over the years, expressing desire to visit, asking about Ethan's well-being, all apparently ignored by me. Photographs of Linda holding handwritten letters, tears on her face. Letters she claimed she'd tried to send but that I'd returned. "I never received any cards," I said, my voice shaking. "Or emails. That bank account? I've never heard of it. This is all lies." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I believe you, but this is sophisticated fabrication. Someone helped her create this entire false narrative. These postmarks look legitimate. The emails have headers that appear authentic. The bank records are official documents." Ethan leaned forward, studying the papers with his characteristic intense focus. "Can I see those emails?" Catherine handed them over. Ethan's eyes moved rapidly across the pages, his fingers tapping against his leg in that familiar pattern. "She's claiming you alienated her from Ethan," Catherine continued. "That you refused contact, kept her letters from reaching him, poisoned him against her. She's positioning herself as a grieving mother kept from her child by an overprotective, controlling grandmother." "That's not what happened," I protested. "I know, but proving it just got much harder." Catherine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and opened an attachment. As she read, her expression grew even more troubled. There's more. Linda has submitted a notarized letter allegedly from you, dated 7 years ago. In it, you supposedly acknowledge that the custody arrangement is temporary and that Linda retains guardianship rights. You allegedly agree to provide care while she works on her mental health, with the understanding she'll resume custody when ready. She turned her computer screen toward me. The letter was there, on what looked like my personal stationery. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine. I never wrote that, I whispered. I've never seen that letter before in my life. Catherine zoomed in on the signature. It's very convincing. If this is a forgery, it's professional quality. Can't we prove it's fake? I asked desperately. We can try. We can hire a forensic document examiner. But that's expensive. And even then, if it's good enough, they might not be able to definitively prove it's forged. She sat back in her chair, her professional composure cracking slightly. Elisa, I need you to understand the situation. If they can convince a judge these documents are legitimate, we could lose. Worse, if this letter is deemed authentic, Linda could argue you've been improperly managing Ethan's funds under false pretenses. That could open you up to criminal charges. The room seemed to tilt. Criminal charges. I could lose everything. Ethan could lose everything. Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. We need to prepare for the possibility that this is going to get much worse before it gets better. 1 week later, we found ourselves in a courtroom for an emergency hearing. Linda had filed a motion claiming Ethan's funds were at immediate risk and requesting emergency measures to protect his assets. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed slightly. The judge was a woman in her mid-50s named Sandra Martinez. She had a stern expression and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Gerald Thompson stood before the judge, presenting his case with practiced ease. Your Honor, we have documented evidence that Miss Crawford maintained consistent contact and financial support for her son over the past decade. Meanwhile, Mrs. Elisa Crawford, the grandmother, has systematically alienated the mother from her child and now controls significant assets belonging to a vulnerable young man with autism. My client is elderly, Gerald continued, and while we don't question her love for her grandson, we have serious concerns about her ability to properly manage $4.6 million in assets. She has no financial training, no background in asset management, and at her age, questions of competency naturally arise. I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation. Catherine stood to object, to present our side, but I could see the judge was already influenced by Gerald's arguments. Linda took the stand, and I watched in horror as my daughter transformed before my eyes. She dabbed at tears with a tissue, her voice breaking as she spoke. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I was young. I was struggling with my mental health after my divorce. My therapist advised some distance while I got treatment, but I never stopped loving my son. I sent money every month. I wrote to him constantly. My mother, she gestured at me, her voice hardening slightly, returned my letters, refused my calls. I respected her advice to give Ethan stability, but I never abandoned him. It was such a convincing performance that for a moment, I almost doubted my own memories. But then I looked at Ethan, sitting beside me, his face impassive, and I remembered the truth. Catherine cross-examined her, pointing out that Linda had never filed for visitation, never contacted Child Protective Services, never hired a lawyer in 10 years to enforce her rights. But Linda had answers for everything, claiming she'd trusted me to do what was best for Ethan, that she'd been afraid of traumatizing him by forcing legal intervention. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth simply and clearly. But Gerald's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my age, my memory, my financial knowledge. He made me sound confused, possibly senile, certainly incompetent. After 2 hours of testimony, Judge Martinez announced her decision. Given the conflicting evidence and the significant assets at stake, I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all accounts associated with Ethan Crawford's trust. A temporary guardian will be appointed, a court official who will oversee the assets until this matter is resolved. Mrs. Elisa Crawford You are temporarily removed as trustee. Neither party will have access to these funds pending the outcome of the full custody hearing, which is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. The gavel came down. My stomach dropped. Outside the courthouse, Linda approached me, her lawyer's mask slipping slightly. She leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. You stole 10 years from me, Mother. Now I'm taking everything. Every penny. You'll be lucky if I don't press charges for financial exploitation. Catherine pulled me away before I could respond. In her car, she laid out the devastating reality. Without access to the trust, you can't pay my retainer for the full trial. The mortgage payment on your house is due, the one you took out for legal fees. Ethan's college acceptance letters are coming in, and they'll need financial documentation. Your credit cards are maxed from initial legal costs. How much do you have in your checking account? About $800, I admitted. My pension check comes in next week. Another $1,200. That's not enough for what we need to do. We need expert witnesses, a forensic document examiner, possibly a private investigator to track down Linda's real story. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. I felt sick. My friends from church had offered to help, but they were mostly retirees like me, living on fixed incomes. They couldn't raise that kind of money. That evening, another envelope arrived at my door. More legal papers from Gerald Thompson's office. This time, Linda was claiming an ownership interest in my house. She argued that when my husband died 20 years ago, the house should have been considered marital property with her as an heir. She'd signed a disclaimer at the time, but now her lawyers were claiming that disclaimer was signed under duress and that she'd been too young to understand what she was giving up. She wants the house too, I told Ethan, my voice hollow. She wants to take everything. Ethan looked at me with those serious eyes. She won't get it, Grandma. Trust me. But I couldn't see how he could be so sure. Catherine called 2 days later. Elisa, I've been doing some digging into Linda's background. I found something disturbing. What? Linda remarried 2 years ago. Her husband is Preston Caldwell. He's a corporate litigation attorney specializing in hostile takeovers and asset seizure cases. High stakes, aggressive tactics. This kind of case is exactly his specialty. My blood ran cold. You think he's behind this? I know he is. I've been reviewing the legal strategy, the quality of the fabricated evidence, the systematic approach. This has Preston's fingerprints all over it. And there's more. I have a contact in the legal community who knows Preston's reputation. He has significant gambling debts, apparently lost big in some bad investments and poker games. He needs money, badly. So they're doing this for the money. Yes, and they've been planning it for a while. I found articles about Ethan's app from 8 months ago, when it was first gaining significant traction. They've been researching this, building their case systematically. Catherine's voice grew even more serious. I also found records of 2 other cases where Preston helped clients make financial claims against family members. Both cases settled out of court. The victims paid rather than fight because Preston's tactics are so aggressive and expensive to defend against. We can expose that. Show the judge this is a pattern. We can try. But without the funds to hire investigators and experts, and with your assets frozen, we're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. I sat down heavily, feeling the weight of impossibility crushing down on me. We were outmaneuvered, outspent, and out of options. 10 days until the hearing. Catherine and I worked frantically to prepare our case. Despite the financial constraints, she'd agreed to continue representing us, touched by our story, and convinced of the injustice. We lined up witnesses. Dr. Sarah Bennett agreed to testify about the abandonment trauma documented in Ethan's therapy records. Teachers from Ethan's school would speak about my involvement and Linda's complete absence. Neighbors would describe watching me raise Ethan alone. Ethan spent most of those days on his computer, working on something he wouldn't explain. When I asked, he just said, "I'm preparing, Grandma. Just trust me." I wanted to trust him, but I was terrified. This was his entire future at stake. The hearing began on a cold morning in late October. The courtroom was more crowded this time. A few reporters had gotten wind of the case, drawn by the human interest angle of the autism app and the family drama. Judge Martinez took her seat, her expression as stern as before. Linda sat at the plaintiff's table with Gerald and Preston beside her. Preston wore an expensive suit and an expression of quiet confidence that made my skin crawl. Gerald presented Linda's case first, walking the judge through the fabricated evidence again. Then he called witnesses. First was a therapist named Dr. Helen Morrison, who testified that she'd treated Linda for severe postpartum depression and anxiety. She described Linda as a loving mother who'd made the difficult decision to maintain therapeutic distance while working on her mental health. In cases of severe postpartum mental health crises, Dr. Morrison explained, sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do is ensure her child has stability while she heals. Miss Crawford made that sacrifice. Catherine cross-examined her, but Dr. Morrison held firm to her story. Next came a woman named Patricia Summers, who claimed to be Linda's best friend. She testified that Linda had been devastated by the separation from Ethan, that she'd cried constantly about missing him, that she'd sent money and letters faithfully. Linda talked about Ethan all the time, Patricia said, her voice earnest. She showed me the letters she wrote to him, the gifts she wanted to send. She was heartbroken that Elisa wouldn't let her see him. Their testimony was polished, rehearsed, devastatingly convincing. I could see Judge Martinez taking notes, her expression thoughtful. Then it was our turn. I took the stand first, my hands trembling as I was sworn in. Catherine guided me through my testimony. I explained the day Linda left, her words about Ethan never being normal, the 10 years of absolute silence. Not a single call, I said. Not one birthday card. I waited, hoping she'd reach out, but she never did. Then Gerald stood for cross-examination, and the nightmare truly began. Mrs. Crawford, how old are you? He asked pleasantly. 68. And your late husband passed away 15 years ago, correct? Yes. So you've been managing household finances, making important decisions, all alone for 15 years. That must be stressful. I manage fine. Do you? Let's talk about your memory. Can you tell me what you had for breakfast 3 days ago? I blinked, thrown by the question. I don't remember specifically. Can you remember what day of the week it was last Tuesday? Tuesday? That was when you served us papers, so yes. But you can't remember what you ate for breakfast a few days ago. Interesting. He smiled, a predator's smile. Mrs. Crawford, isn't it possible that you're confused about this notarized letter? That perhaps you did sign it, but don't remember? No, I would remember that. Would you? You just admitted you can't remember what you ate for breakfast. Memory can be unreliable, especially as we age. Catherine objected, but the seed was planted. Gerald continued, asking me about managing Ethan's trust, implying I was in over my head, suggesting I'd kept control because I enjoyed having access to money. You've spent your entire adult life on a modest income, haven't you? He asked. Your husband was a factory worker. You never went to college. And suddenly you're managing millions of dollars. Quite a change in lifestyle. That money is for Ethan, I protested. But you control it. You make the decisions. A woman with no financial education, no business experience, controlling a multi-million-dollar trust. And you never once thought Linda might have a right to be involved in her own son's life? By the time he finished, I felt small and foolish and old. I could see the doubt in Judge Martinez's eyes. Dr. Bennett testified next, describing Ethan's abandonment trauma, the years of therapy, to help him process his mother's departure. But Gerald produced records, documents on Dr. Bennett's own letterhead, showing Linda had attended several therapy sessions to work on reunification. Dr. Bennett looked bewildered. I have no memory of any sessions with Linda Crawford. These records must be falsified. Or perhaps you don't remember, Gerald suggested smoothly. How many patients do you see, doctor? Hundreds? Over 10 years? Isn't it possible you simply don't recall? The records looked official, complete with Dr. Bennett's signature and practice details. She insisted they were fake, but I could see the judge's growing skepticism. Our neighbor witnesses testified about Linda's absence, but Gerald had photographs. Pictures of Linda, apparently visiting our street, time-stamped and geotagged, showing her standing near our house at various times over the years. Perhaps your neighbors didn't see her, Gerald suggested, because she was respecting Mrs. Crawford's wishes to stay away, but she tried. She came by, hoping for a glimpse of her son. Each piece of evidence was meticulously fabricated, but it looked real. Our witnesses seemed uncertain, confused, their credibility eroding under Gerald's skillful questioning. Then Preston Caldwell took the stand as Linda's husband and Ethan's stepfather. He spoke with calm authority, describing his concern for Ethan's welfare. "I'm a lawyer," he said. "When Linda told me about her son, about the app he'd developed, I naturally wanted to ensure everything was being handled properly. I had Mrs. Crawford observed by a professional, just informally, to assess the situation. He produced a report from a psychiatrist named Dr. Marcus Chen. The report suggested signs of early dementia, memory lapses, confusion in handling complex financial matters. I'm not saying Mrs. Crawford is a bad person," Preston continued, his voice sympathetic. "But she's elderly, she's overwhelmed, and she's managing assets that require professional expertise. I'm concerned for both her well-being and Ethan's future." Catherine objected strenuously. "This so-called evaluation was done without consent, without proper examination. It's completely inadmissible." "It's a preliminary assessment, Your Honor," Gerald countered. "We're requesting a formal competency evaluation before the final hearing." Then came the final blow. Gerald produced an audio recording. When he played it, I heard my own voice saying, "I had to keep her away. She couldn't be trusted with him." The words were mine, but they were taken from a conversation with Catherine, edited and manipulated. I'd been talking about protecting Ethan, not alienating Linda, but without the full context, it sounded damning. Judge Martinez held up her hand. "I've heard enough for today. Mrs. Elisa Crawford, I'm ordering you to undergo a formal competency evaluation before we reconvene. We'll resume this hearing in 3 days, after the evaluation is complete." Outside the courthouse, Catherine pulled me aside, her expression grave. "Elisa, we're in serious trouble. They've systematically destroyed your credibility. Every witness, every piece of evidence, they've had a counter to it. This is sophisticated legal warfare. What do? We fight. But I need you to understand how bad this is. If that competency evaluation suggests cognitive decline, if the judge believes you've been improperly managing Ethan's money, you could face more than just losing custody. You could face criminal charges for elder abuse and financial exploitation." I felt the world collapsing around me. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, it was all falling apart. The competency evaluation was scheduled for the next morning at Dr. Marcus Chen's office. Catherine had objected to using the same psychiatrist Preston had hired, but the judge had noted that Dr. Chen was a respected professional and could conduct an objective assessment. The office was clinical and cold, all white walls and fluorescent lighting. Dr. Chen was in his 50s, with graying hair and an expression that seemed dismissive from the moment I walked in. The evaluation was humiliating. Simple tests of memory and cognitive function felt impossible under the pressure. He showed me lists of words to remember, then asked me to recall them 5 minutes later. My mind went blank. He asked me to perform basic math calculations. I stumbled over problems I could normally solve easily. "When did World War II end?" he asked at one point. 1945, I answered. "And World War I?" My mind froze. "I'm not sure. 1918, I think?" He made a note. "You're uncertain about basic historical facts." "I'm nervous," I protested. "This isn't a fair assessment of my abilities." "Memory shouldn't be significantly impaired by nervousness," he said coolly. "Can you tell me the current president?" "Of course I can. Please do." But for a moment, under his judgmental stare, I blanked. The answer was there, just out of reach, my stress making it impossible to think clearly. Later, I learned that Preston and Dr. Chen belonged to the same professional networking group. Whether that influenced the evaluation, I couldn't prove, but the bias felt palpable. That evening, Catherine met me at a coffee shop, unable to afford running her office meter. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "I've reviewed where we stand," she said without preamble. "It's not good, Elisa. They've countered every piece of our evidence. Your credibility is shot. The competency evaluation will likely show cognitive decline, even if it's just stress-induced." She spread papers across the table. "The evidence against you looks overwhelming. The fabricated records, the witnesses, Linda's performance. A judge looking at this sees a devoted mother who tried to maintain contact with her disabled son, only to be blocked by an elderly grandmother who may not be competent to handle his affairs. So what do we do?" My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the words I'd been dreading. "Linda's lawyer contacted me this afternoon with a settlement offer." "What kind of offer?" "You keep the house. They'll drop the property claim. You get $50,000, a lump sum payment for your years of care. In exchange, Linda gets guardianship and control of all of Ethan's assets." $50,000. After raising Ethan for 10 years, after everything we'd been through, that's what they thought his childhood was worth. "What happens to Ethan?" I asked. "He's 18, technically an adult. But with the guardianship in place, Linda would control his finances, make his major life decisions. She'd likely move him to live with her and Preston. He doesn't even know her. She's a stranger to him." Catherine's expression was pained. "I know, but if we keep fighting and lose in court, the outcome could be much worse. If the judge rules against you completely, you could lose the house, face criminal charges, and Linda gets everything anyway. At least with the settlement, you'd have something. You'd be safe. And if we refuse, then we go back to court in 3 days and take our chances. But Elisa, I have to be honest with you. Based on what I've seen, our odds of winning are maybe 20%. They've built an almost perfect case against you. Every angle covered, every piece of evidence fabricated but convincing." She leaned forward. "There's more. I've been investigating Preston's background, trying to find something we can use. He and Gerald were law school roommates. This isn't the first time they've run this kind of scheme." "You mean they've done this before?" 3 times that I can find. Always the same pattern. Vulnerable person with sudden wealth, estranged family member with falsified evidence, settlement right before trial. The victims were too scared or exhausted to fight, but I found one case that was different. 2 years ago, an elderly man in Oregon, Preston and Gerald tried the same thing, but something went wrong. They suddenly withdrew all claims. What happened? I don't know. The case file is sealed. There's a reference to a minor complainant witness, someone who testified against them. The man had a grandson who was involved somehow. But I can't get the details without a subpoena, and we don't have time or money for that. A tiny spark of hope flickered, so they can be beaten. Maybe, but I don't know how, and we have less than 72 hours to figure it out. Catherine's voice dropped. And there's something else. Through a contact at the courthouse, I learned that if Linda and Preston win guardianship, they have papers already prepared to institutionalize Ethan. The word hit me like a physical blow. What? They're claiming that despite his accomplishments, he's not capable of managing his own affairs due to his autism. They'll argue he needs specialized care in a residential facility. Once they have guardianship, they can make that decision. They'd have complete control of his money and his life. I felt physically ill. They weren't just after the money. They wanted Ethan locked away where he couldn't fight back, couldn't advocate for himself. "They have to be stopped," I said. "I agree, but I don't know how." Catherine gathered her papers. "You have 24 hours to accept the settlement. After that, we go to trial and hope for a miracle." I drove home in a daze. The house was dark except for the light coming from Ethan's room. I found him at his computer as always, multiple screens glowing, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "Ethan, sweetheart, we need to talk." He held up one hand, finishing whatever he was typing, then turned to face me. His expression was calm, almost serene, which seemed impossible given the circumstances. "I know what's happening, Grandma," he said. "I've been listening to your phone calls with Catherine. I know about the settlement offer." "Oh, Ethan." I sank into the chair beside his desk, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry. I tried so hard to protect you. I tried to fight, but they're too powerful. They've thought of everything." "Have they?" He turned back to his computer. "I've been working on something. Since the day Linda showed up, I've been preparing." "Preparing what?" "A defense. Grandma, I need you to trust me. I need you to refuse the settlement. I need you to get Linda and Preston back into that courtroom. But Catherine says we'll lose. They could institutionalize you. Take everything." "They won't." His certainty was absolute. "Trust me. Just let her talk. Let Linda keep talking. Let her tell her lies. The more she talks, the better." I stared at my grandson, this brilliant, strange, wonderful boy. "What have you done?" "I've been documenting everything," he said simply. "Every piece of evidence they've submitted, every claim they've made. I've been analyzing it, cross-referencing it, checking it against verifiable data. And I've found something, Grandma. Something they didn't know I could find." His fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up files and documents. "Remember what you taught me? That the truth always matters? That honesty is more important than winning?" Yes, they forgot that. They lied so much, so systematically, that they left traces, digital traces, and I found them all. A flicker of hope, small but real, kindled in my chest. "Can you prove their evidence is fake?" "Better than that. I can prove they knew it was fake. I can prove they coordinated this whole thing. I can prove they've done it before." He met my eyes. "But I need them in that courtroom. I need them confident. I need them to think they've won. That's a huge risk." "I know. But it's the only way to really beat them. Not just win the case, but expose them for what they are." I thought of everything at stake. Everything we could lose. But I also thought of what we'd already lost if we gave up now. "Okay," I said. "I trust you." Catherine called 2 hours later with an urgent update. "Elisa, my private investigator finally got back to me. He found something about Preston's gambling debts. They're worse than I thought. He owes $300,000 to some very dangerous people. The kind who don't wait patiently for payment. So is disparity. Very. And desperate people make mistakes. But he's also more dangerous because of it." She paused. "Have you made a decision about the settlement?" "We're refusing it." "Are you sure?" "This is an enormous risk." "I'm sure. We fight." I could hear the mix of relief and fear in Catherine's voice. "All right. Then we go back to court the day after tomorrow, and we give it everything we've got." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, praying I'd made the right choice. Praying that Ethan's confidence wasn't just the optimism of a teenager who didn't fully understand how corrupt the system could be. But then I remembered him at 8 years old, explaining coding concepts to me that I barely understood, his mind working in ways that saw patterns invisible to others. If anyone could find the truth hidden in the lies, it was Ethan. I just hoped the judge would listen. Morning came with a cold rain that matched my mood. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every possible disaster scenario. Catherine had called early to confirm we'd officially rejected the settlement. She said Gerald had been furious, threatening that we'd regret our decision. By 9 o'clock, we were back in the courtroom. Judge Martinez took her seat, her expression suggesting she was not pleased about having to hear more of this case. The first order of business was Dr. Chen's competency evaluation report. He took the stand and testified that while I didn't show signs of advanced dementia, his evaluation revealed concerning indicators of cognitive decline, including memory lapses, confusion under stress, and difficulty with complex reasoning. In my professional opinion, Dr. Chen concluded, Mrs. Crawford's ability to manage complex financial affairs is questionable at best. I would recommend oversight of any significant assets under her control. Catherine cross-examined him, pointing out that the evaluation had been conducted under duress, that stress-induced performance anxiety could explain my struggles. She presented a counter-evaluation from another psychologist she'd rushed to complete, showing normal cognitive function. But Dr. Chen's report was more detailed, more official-looking. Then Linda took the stand for her direct examination. This was her chance to present her full case to the judge. Gerald walked her through her story again, and Linda's performance was Oscar-worthy. She described her postpartum struggles, her desperate attempts to maintain contact with Ethan, her heartbreak at being shut out. She produced more evidence of her attempts to be part of his life. She wept delicately, her voice breaking at just the right moments. "I made mistakes," she said, looking directly at Judge Martinez. "I was young, I was struggling. I made the difficult decision to give Ethan stability by letting my mother care for him. But I never abandoned him. Never. I thought about him every single day. I sent money, I wrote letters, I tried to visit. And now that he's accomplished something amazing, now that he's built this incredible app, I just want to be part of his life again. I want to protect him, to make sure he's taken care of." "Miss Crawford," Gerald said gently, "what are your intentions if guardianship is granted?" "I want Ethan to come live with me and my husband. Preston has experience managing significant assets. We have the resources to ensure Ethan gets the best care, the best opportunities. We want to set up proper trust management, financial advisors, everything he needs to secure his future." She looked at me with manufactured sadness. "My mother did her best. I know that. But she's not equipped to handle this level of complexity. And Ethan, with his special needs, requires professional guidance." I felt rage building in my chest at the phrase special needs, the way she used his autism as a weapon against him. Now came Catherine's cross-examination. She stood, and I could see the determination in her eyes. She'd refused to give up on us, even when victory seemed impossible. "Miss Crawford, let's talk about the money you claim to have sent for Ethan's care. $200 a month for 7 years, according to your bank records. That's correct?" "Yes," Linda answered confidently. "And you testified that this was all you could afford while working on your mental health?" "That's right. I wasn't wealthy. I was struggling. But public records show you were employed full-time at a marketing firm during that period, earning approximately $60,000 annually. Is that correct?" Linda hesitated. "He had expenses." "Of course. And where is Ethan's account where this money was deposited? What bank?" "First National Bank." "And do you have account statements showing withdrawals for Ethan's benefit?" "I gave the money to my mother," Linda said smoothly. "She had access to the account. But Mrs. Crawford testified she never knew about this account. She's confused. We discussed it." Catherine pressed on, asking about the birthday cards, the letters, the emails. Linda had polished answers for everything. She'd clearly rehearsed extensively. "Let's talk about your husband, Preston Caldwell," Catherine said. "When did he first learn about Ethan's app?" "When we started dating, about 2 years ago, and he took an immediate interest in Ethan's financial situation. He was concerned, as any step-parent would be. Concerned about Ethan, or concerned about $4.6 million? Gerald objected. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Martinez ruled. Catherine tried different angles, but Linda was prepared for everything. Nothing rattled her. Nothing broke through her carefully constructed story. Finally, Catherine sat down. I could see the frustration and defeat in her posture. Judge Martinez looked at her watch. "Is there anything else?" Catherine glanced at me, then at Ethan. "Your Honor, Ethan Crawford would like to address the court." This was it. Everything depended on what happened next. The judge seemed surprised. "Mr. Crawford, you're not required to testify." Ethan stood. "I know, Your Honor, but I'd like to speak." "Very well." Ethan approached the front of the courtroom. He didn't show any nervousness, his movements careful and deliberate as always. He set his laptop on the table beside the witness stand. "Your Honor, may I ask my mother some questions?" Judge Martinez frowned. That's unusual. Please, Ethan said simply. Just a few questions. The judge considered, then nodded. You may proceed, but keep it brief. Ethan turned to face Linda, who was still on the witness stand. She looked at him with that manufactured maternal warmth, smiling like the loving mother she'd never been. Ethan, sweetheart, she began. I know this must be confusing for you. Do you remember me? He asked, his voice flat and emotionless. Of course I do. You're my son. Tell me about when I was little. What do you remember? Linda's smile widened. Oh, so many things. You were such a sweet baby. You loved it when I sang to you. What did you sing? Your favorite lullaby. Hush, little baby. Ethan nodded. Do you remember my birthday parties? Every one of them, sweetheart. Tell me about the one when I turned 7. Before you left. Oh, that was lovely. We had it at the park. You loved the swings. What kind of cake did I have? Chocolate, your favorite. And who was there? Your friends from school. Marcus was still around then. We had such a nice day. I watched Ethan's face remain expressionless as Linda wove her memories. But I remembered that 7th birthday. We'd had a small party at my house because Linda had been too depressed to organize anything. There had been no park, no friends from school because Ethan had struggled with social connections. The cake had been vanilla, not chocolate. Do you remember the beach trip? Ethan asked. Of course. You built the most elaborate sandcastle. And the pizza place birthday party when I was 6? You were so excited. You played in the ball pit for hours. Every memory Linda confirmed was false. Ethan was creating fictional events, and Linda, desperate to seem connected to her son, was agreeing to all of them. Then Ethan turned to his laptop. Your Honor, may I present some evidence? Judge Martinez gestured for him to continue. Ethan connected his laptop to the courtroom's projection system. The screen lit up with a complex digital timeline. I've been working on this since my mother first appeared at our door, Ethan began. His voice was steady, clinical, like he was presenting a school project. I wanted to understand the evidence she submitted, so I analyzed it. The screen showed the birthday cards Linda had submitted. Ethan zoomed in on the postmarks. These cards were allegedly mailed on these dates. But if you cross-reference with postal service records, these particular post offices were closed on 3 of these dates. Government holidays. It's impossible for them to have been postmarked then. He pulled up another screen. The emails my mother claims to have sent to my grandmother. They contain header information showing they originated from these IP addresses. But these IP addresses didn't exist in the claimed time frame. They were allocated by internet service providers 3 to 5 years after these emails were supposedly sent. Linda's face was going pale. Preston and Gerald were conferring frantically in whispers. Ethan continued methodically. The photographs showing my mother visiting our street. The metadata on these images shows they were taken 6 to 8 months ago, not over the course of years as claimed. The timestamps were altered, but the EXIF data reveals the truth. He pulled up bank records, the deposits to the account, for my benefit. This account was opened 6 months ago. The transaction history was backdated, but if you check with the bank's actual server logs, you'll find the account didn't exist prior to 6 months ago. Judge Martinez was leaning forward now, her attention completely focused. The notarized letter, allegedly from my grandmother. Ethan displayed a high-resolution scan. The signature is genuine, but it's been digitally transferred from another document. If you examine the letter under forensic analysis, you'll find inconsistencies in the ink absorption, the pressure patterns. It's a composite document. He looked at Linda. You confirmed memories that never happened. The 7th birthday party at the park. There was no party at the park. We had a small gathering at Grandma's house. No chocolate cake. No friends from school. The beach trip never occurred. The pizza place party never happened. You agreed to false memories because you don't actually remember my childhood. You weren't there. The courtroom was dead silent. Linda's mask was cracking, her expression shifting from fake warmth to something harder. Your Honor, Ethan said, his voice still calm. There's one more thing. He pulled up an audio file. During the last court recess, I accidentally left my phone in Mr. Caldwell's coat pocket. It continued recording. He pressed play. Preston's voice filled the courtroom. Just keep crying. Judges love the abandoned mother story. Show emotion, but don't overdo it. Linda's laugh, cold and hard. The stupid old woman actually thought she could fight us. Did you see her face when they froze the accounts? Perfect. The competency evaluation will seal it. Chen owes me a favor. He'll make her look senile. And then we get guardianship, liquidate everything, pay off my debts, and disappear. The kid's autistic. No one will listen to him anyway. What about institutionalizing him like you mentioned? That's just to scare them into settling. But if they refuse, yeah, we'll do it. Stick him in some facility. Claim it's for his own good. He won't be able to fight back once we have legal control. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Martinez's face had gone from stern to furious. Counselor Thompson approached the bench. Now, Gerald stood on shaky legs, Preston beside him looking like he might be sick. They approached the judge, who spoke in a low, angry voice that still carried through the room. This is your case? This fabricated, fraudulent garbage? You submitted falsified evidence to my court? Your Honor, I was misled by my client, Gerald began. You drafted these documents. You knew. The judge's voice was ice. Bailiff, these 3 individuals are not to leave this courtroom. She looked out at the courtroom. I'm calling a recess. The district attorney's office will be contacted immediately. I want everyone to remain where they are. Linda stood suddenly, pointing at Ethan. You ungrateful little freak. I'm your mother. That money is mine. You owe me for giving birth to you. The mask was completely gone now, revealing the ugliness beneath. Preston tried to quiet her, but she shook him off. 10 years I stayed away, and this is how you repay me? By stealing what's rightfully mine? You're nothing but a broken, autistic little robot who got lucky? Miss Crawford, sit down and be quiet, Judge Martinez ordered. But Linda was past reason. I should have given you up for adoption when you were diagnosed. I should have never let her take you. That money is mine. Security moved in as Linda continued her tirade. I watched my daughter, this person I'd given birth to and raised, reveal herself completely. Not a grieving mother. Not someone who'd made mistakes. Just a greedy, cruel woman who saw her own child as nothing more than a source of money. Ethan watched her impassively. When she finally exhausted herself, he turned to Judge Martinez. I'd like the record to show, he said quietly, that my mother just confirmed everything my grandmother has been saying for weeks. She abandoned me. She never cared. And she only came back for money. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. So noted, Mr. Crawford. So noted. Judge Martinez reconvened court an hour later. A representative from the district attorney's office sat in the back row, taking notes. Linda, Preston, and Gerald sat at their table, looking like condemned prisoners, which, in a sense, they were. The judge's voice was cold and precise. Having reviewed the evidence presented by Ethan Crawford, and having heard the recording of the defendants discussing their fraudulent scheme, this court makes the following findings. She looked directly at Linda. Miss Crawford, your petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, all previous custody rights are hereby terminated. Your actions demonstrate conclusively that you abandoned your son and only returned when financial gain was possible. Linda started to protest, but the judge held up her hand. You will remain silent, or you will be held in contempt. Judge Martinez continued. Mrs. Elisa Crawford, I apologize for the treatment you've received in this courtroom. The fraud perpetrated against you was sophisticated and systematic. Your guardianship of Ethan is hereby confirmed and made permanent. All frozen assets are immediately restored to your control. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I thought I might faint. Catherine squeezed my hand. As for you 3, the judge said, looking at Linda, Preston, and Gerald, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The charges under consideration include fraud, perjury, attempted theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse. You will surrender your passports immediately. Bail will be set at a hearing tomorrow. She turned to the bailiff. These individuals are not to leave the courthouse until they've been processed. Linda screamed something incoherent. Preston just stared at the table, his face ashen. Gerald tried one more time to claim he'd been deceived, but the judge wasn't interested. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and it was over. In the hallway outside, reporters surrounded us, shouting questions. Catherine managed to extract us from the crowd and into a quiet conference room. I can't believe it, she said, shaking her head. Ethan, that was the most extraordinary piece of investigative work I've ever seen. How did you do all that? Ethan shrugged slightly. I'm good with computers. People forget that digital information leaves traces. Everything they fabricated, every lie they told, it all left evidence. I just had to find it. The recording was brilliant, Catherine said. How did you know they'd incriminate themselves? I didn't. But people who are winning tend to get overconfident. They stop being careful. I left my phone in the coat pocket on purpose. I hoped they'd talk, and they did. I pulled Ethan into a hug, tears streaming down my face. You saved us. You saved everything. You saved me first, Grandma, he said simply. When I was 8 and she left, you saved me then. I was just returning the favor. Over the following weeks, the legal aftermath unfolded. The district attorney's office discovered that Linda, Preston, and Gerald had run similar schemes in 3 other states. Victims began coming forward, people who'd settled rather than fight, who'd been too scared or exhausted to stand up to them. Federal charges were filed for conspiracy and wire fraud. The case made national news, not just because of the fraud, but because of Ethan's story. An autistic teenager taking down sophisticated con artists with nothing but his laptop and his mind. The publicity brought unexpected benefits. Ethan's app saw a surge in users, people inspired by his story. The valuation increased to over $6 million. Universities that had been considering his applications suddenly were actively recruiting him, offering full scholarships. But more importantly, the autism community reached out. Parents, therapists, educators, all thanking Ethan for showing what people with autism could accomplish. He started getting invitations to speak at conferences, to consult on other apps, to help design educational programs. All the legal fees were eventually recovered from Preston and Linda's assets. Catherine waived her remaining fees, saying the case had been the most meaningful of her career. My house lien was released. The mortgage company sent an apology letter for the stress we'd endured. Friends and neighbors who'd supported us threw a celebration. But the real healing happened quietly, at home. One evening, about a month after the trial, Ethan and I sat on the porch. It was a cool November evening, the kind where you need a sweater, but it's pleasant to be outside. We sat in comfortable silence, something we'd always been good at. Can I ask you something? I said eventually. Sure. When did you start preparing? When did you know you'd need to build that case? Ethan was quiet for a moment. When I was 12, I read about a similar case online, where someone came back after years to claim money from a relative. I realized logically that if my app became successful, there was a probability my mother might return. Autism makes me good at seeing patterns, understanding probabilities. So I started documenting everything. Every day, I backed up our records, saved communications, tracked our lives. Just in case. You've been preparing for 6 years? Not actively, just systematically. It's what I do. I document, I organize, I prepare for multiple scenarios. Most people thought my attention to detail was just autism, but it's also strategy. I felt a wave of admiration for this remarkable young man. Your mother said some terrible things in that courtroom. About you being autistic. Does that hurt? He considered the question carefully, the way he always did. Yes and no. It hurts that she sees autism as a deficit, as something broken. But her opinion doesn't change reality. Autism isn't a deficit. It's a different kind of operating system. Different strengths, different challenges. The way my brain works let me see the patterns in their lies. It let me build the evidence systematically. In a way, my autism saved us both. I'm sorry she came back. I'm sorry you had to go through all this. Don't be. I learned something important. I learned that you'd fight for me no matter what. Even when it looked hopeless, even when everyone said we'd lose, you kept fighting. That's what real love looks like. Not biology, not obligation, choice. You chose me every day for 10 years. That's family. We talked about the future then. Ethan had been accepted early admission to MIT's computer science program. He was excited but nervous about the social aspects of college. We discussed strategies, accommodations, support systems. I want to do something with the app money, he said. Create a foundation. Help other autistic kids learn coding. Help them develop their own apps. Show them they can build things that matter. That's a beautiful idea. And I want to make sure you're taken care of. Financially. You sacrificed everything for me. That mortgage you took out, all those years on a fixed income. I want you to be comfortable. Ethan, that money is yours. No, Grandma, it's ours. You made it possible. Every line of code I wrote it in the house you provided, eating food you bought, wearing clothes you somehow afforded. You invested in me when I was worthless by society's standards. This is your return on investment. I started crying again, which seemed to be my default state lately. Tears of gratitude, of relief, of love. A letter arrived the next week from Linda. She was in jail awaiting trial, bail having been set extraordinarily high given the flight risk. I expected rage, blame, more of her venomous self-justification. Instead, I found something sadder. A rambling letter about how she'd been under Preston's influence, how he'd manipulated her, how none of this was really her fault. She claimed she'd always loved Ethan but hadn't known how to show it. She said if I'd just given her some of the money, none of this would have happened. Not once did she acknowledge the pain she'd caused. Not once did she take responsibility for abandoning her son, for trying to exploit him, for the cruelty of her words in the courtroom. It was everyone's fault but hers. I read it once and put it away. I didn't respond. Some people are incapable of seeing their own darkness. Some people will always blame circumstances, other people, anything but themselves. I chose not to hate her. Hate would poison me, and I'd spent too many years building something good to let her destroy it now. Instead, I felt sadness for her. Sadness for the life she could have had with this remarkable son, the joy she missed, the love she threw away. But mostly, I felt free. Free from the fear that she'd return. Free from the legal battle. Free from the uncertainty. In June, Ethan graduated high school early. He'd completed his requirements ahead of schedule, eager to start college. The school held a special ceremony recognizing his accomplishments. Not just the app, but his impact on the autism community. They asked him to give a speech. I sat in the audience, proud but nervous. Public speaking was challenging for Ethan, all those eyes on him, the social performance required. He took the stage, standing at the podium in his graduation gown, looking impossibly young and impossibly wise at the same time. Everyone expects me to talk about my app, he began. About coding, about success, about overcoming autism. But autism isn't something to overcome. It's part of who I am. It's the lens through which I see the world. And that lens lets me see things others miss. He paused, looking out at the audience. What I want to talk about is family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. The family that chooses you back. He found me in the crowd. My grandmother taught me that love isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about staying when things get hard. It's about believing in someone when the world says they're broken. My tears were back, but this time they were pure joy. She taught me that being different isn't being less. That my value isn't in being normal, but in being authentically myself. And she taught me that the most powerful thing you can do is keep fighting for what's right, even when everyone says you're going to lose. He concluded with words that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. People ask me about my success, about the money, about the app, but my real success is standing here, because someone loved me enough to see my potential when I couldn't see it myself. My grandmother raised me alone, and together we proved that real family isn't about blood. It's about love, sacrifice, and believing in each other. That's all the success I'll ever need. The audience gave him a standing ovation. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop smiling. After the ceremony, as people congratulated Ethan and asked for selfies with the famous app developer, he stayed close to me. Despite the overwhelming social situation, despite the noise and the crowd, he made sure I was included in every conversation, credited me in every success. That night, back home, I reflected on our journey. From the day Linda dropped him off with a single suitcase to this moment, celebrating his graduation and his future. All the struggles, the therapy appointments, the IEP meetings at school, the nights I'd cried wondering if I was doing enough. Every moment had been worth it. I thought about the letter Linda sent, claiming none of this was her fault, but I'd learned something through all this. You don't get to abandon someone and then claim credit when they succeed. You don't get to tear someone down and then demand to share their triumph. Real love means being there through the hard parts, the meltdowns and the struggles, the diagnosis and the therapy, the small victories and the setbacks. Real love means sacrifice without expecting repayment. It means believing in potential when others see only limitations. Ethan had saved us both, it was true, but I'd saved him first, years ago, by making a simple choice. The choice to stay, to love him unconditionally, to fight for him no matter what. And in the end, that choice saved us both. The legal system eventually held Linda, Preston, and Gerald accountable. Linda pled guilty to avoid trial and received 3 years in prison. Preston got 7 years for his leadership role in the conspiracy. Gerald was disbarred and sentenced to 4 years. Their other victims received restitution. The case led to changes in how family law courts verify evidence, implementing better systems to catch forgeries and fabrications. But for me, justice wasn't really about their punishment. Justice was Ethan thriving, free to build his future without their shadow hanging over him. Justice was proving that truth and love could triumph over manipulation and greed. As I write this, Ethan is preparing for his first semester at MIT. His foundation to help autistic children learn coding has awarded its first grants. He's working on a new app designed to help autistic adults navigate workplace environments. And me? I'm exactly where I want to be. Still in the house I raised him in, still his grandmother, still his advocate. But now I'm also watching him spread his wings, knowing that no matter how far he flies, he'll always have a home to come back to. Because that's what real family means. Not ownership or control or claiming credit. Just love, support, and the knowledge that you're not alone in this world. Someone asked me recently if I'd do it all again, knowing how hard it would be. The financial struggles, the isolation, the legal battle, all of it. But mostly, I felt free. Free from the fear that she'd return. Free from the legal battle. Free from the uncertainty. Because love isn't measured in convenience. It's measured in commitment, in showing up, in staying. And Ethan was worth every single moment. I want to ask you something. When you think about family, what does it really mean to you? Is it the people you share blood with, or the people who show up when life gets hard? Have you ever had to fight for someone you love, even when everyone said it was hopeless? Or maybe you've been that person someone fought for, and you know the difference it makes. Whatever your story is, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Your experiences matter, your voice matters. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of what really matters in life, please consider sharing it. Maybe someone in your life needs to hear that being different isn't being less. That real love means staying. That fighting for what's right is always worth it, even when victory seems impossible. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Stories about resilience, truth, and the kind of love that changes everything. And don't forget to like this video. It helps others find these stories, and you never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. I hope wherever you are, whatever challenges you're facing, you remember that truth has a way of speaking loudest in the end. That love is the most powerful force in the universe. And that sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be the one who saves everyone. May you find your own version of victory. May you recognize the real family in your life. And may you always have the courage to keep fighting for what matters. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, you're stronger than you think you are.